That was for my nephew. What is up, everybody? We are in the final days of ownership of the Harley-Davidson 2013 Dyna Fat Bob. And I wish I was in a more ideal situation here because I've been sick for like a week. So I don't know how much I've got in the tank as far as the ride goes today, but we're gonna get out today. And I had to make these videos because really we're turning this baby in as soon as my bike arrives. So let's just jump right in to this final review of my 2013 Harley-Davidson Dyna Fat Bob. So let's talk about what I love about this bike. First of all, it's hard to say goodbye because this is the most time, the biggest commitment, the most money I've ever put into a bike as far as mods go, as far as, you know, like I said, time and just really miles in the saddle as well. This is the most I've ever put into a bike. So it's going to be hard to let go, as much as I know I'm making the right decision because of the change that I want to make as far as how I ride and you know, the style of riding I want to try out and to do while I still have the energy and the and the time. You gotta excuse my voice here because, like I said, I've been sick. But all those things aside, let's just get it right into the positive. So this is a really comfortable bike to ride, and for the weight, it is very maneuverable, and I would even venture out to say that it's a sporty feeling bike. If you've watched my rides out in the twisties, as on our foothill ride, on our Berryessa ride,
flashback.
I did all of those rides and I never scraped a peg. Now, you know, when we went out with Moto Carry and Sir Flesh Wound, their bikes are sportier and they could definitely lean into some of those turns, but they ride a little bit more like I do, even though they have sport bikes. And they're not super aggressive in their riding style, but I was still able to keep up and get into those turns a little bit, and this bike had no problem.
Flashback.
So that's something that really just got to take hats off to the Dyna Fat Bob in its ability to lean over and to feel sporty, even though it's almost I mean, really, it's a 700-pound bike, and that's a heavy bike. The other huge positive on this bike is it is so customizable. I mean, you can do so much to this bike to make it your own, as far as looks, as far as performance. And you know, I would, if you really love the Dyna Fat Bob and it's the bike that you want and the bike you want to spend a lot of money and a lot of time on, you can make this bike more like a touring bike. You know, they sell fairings, front fairings for this bike to make it a little more comfortable on touring. You know, you could change the rear suspension, and you can put saddlebags on it. You can make this bike one of those bikes. But if you're asking me, in my opinion, I would say, after riding several touring bikes, save your money and just get a touring bike if that's what you really want. This bike, I think, was made a little bit more for a sportier feel, and you know, it's just it's that in-between bike between like the 1200 Sportster and you know, like a big touring bike. It's a really good in-between. So if that's what you're looking for, if that's what you think would be a good next bike for you, or a good first bike for you, really check this bike out if you can find one used. Basically, it's the same bike all the way through 2017. 2018 was when they made the big change to the Softail as opposed to the Dyna. And you know, you're going to get a different look, a little bit of a different look, but it still only has the 103 cubic inch big twin engine in it. So the other thing I would say is at 5'6" and a 30-inch inseam, I have pretty long arms. I think my arm span is about 5'10". This is a pretty comfortable riding position for me. I do have to lean a little bit forward, and my feet, after I put in the reduced reach forward control kit, my feet are in a good place. They are in a good place. It's still a little bit of a stretch, so I would say if you're 5'8" to 6 feet tall, this is going to be an ideal riding position. It's going to be an ideal fit for you physically. Now again, you can do mods to your bike. You can get some risers to get the handlebars to come closer. You can I think that you can even install a mid foot controls on this bike, but again, you're spending more money. If you're looking for a mid control bike with handlebars that come back to you a little bit better, look at a, I think I would say look at a Street Bob. And again, these are all things, if the Fat Bob is the bike that you want, I have no qualms with this bike. I've really enjoyed owning this bike and having this bike as my third Harley and my fourth motorcycle that I've owned. So let's get down to what I didn't like about this bike, because really I could go on all day about what I do like about this bike, but if you want, check out my initial review of this bike and then my 6-month review. I did go into a lot of what I like about this bike, and I'll have links for those reviews in the description. But the main things that I take issue with on this bike, number one is the weight. It's 700 pounds, and to me, you know, walking around this bike and taking a look at what's on this bike, I don't think that it has to be 700 pounds. Now, can you make mods to this bike to probably make it lighter? Yeah, you probably could. You know, you could switch out the exhaust to make it a little bit lighter. I don't know what else you could possibly do. You know, I think you could probably change out the wheels to reduce the weight. But it's a heavy bike, and you feel it when you're trying to maneuver it around. And for a shorter guy, you know, I can maneuver it pretty well. But if you're on an incline and you're trying to back it in somewhere, or it's starting to lean over on you, it gets you get really worried. Now, I almost laid it down one time. I've had this bike for about a year and 3 or 4 months, and I almost leaned it over, and that was in with like the first week that I owned the bike, really. But since then, I haven't had no problems with the weight of the bike. But it is something to consider if you're a smaller person and you're concerned with a heavier bike. Yeah, this bike weighs 700 pounds. There are definitely cruisers out there with similar power, with a little less weight. So that is something that you'll want to take into consideration if you're thinking about getting this bike. The other main issue that I take with this bike, oh, and I don't want to have to pull out my notes because I'm pretty sure I know what it is.
5 minutes later.
Okay. So other than the weight of the bike, the only other thing that I have against this bike was the reach for the pegs. And again, we did something about that by moving it back with the reduced reach, and that was only like 1.25 inches. It was back and slightly up towards me, and that really did the trick. It's not as much of a reach, you know, if I'm just wearing like tennis shoes. It's a little bit hard when I'm wearing my boots. It's not a reach at all anymore. But it is one of those things where the Harley-Davidson models, the Dynas especially, with the forward controls, all the way through 2017, 2018, I think, is when they really started considering, you know, let's make this more accessible for shorter riders. And that was a big help to me. All of the 2018 models, really, except for the Breakout, it's not really a reach for me at all on any of those models stock. So, you know, it's not, it was like $80 or $130. It wasn't that much to install this kit, and I did it myself. It's not a difficult install at all. If you're on Revzilla at all, it's like a one scale 1 on the beard level of difficulty as far as making that mod. So even though that's the thing that I had issue with when I bought this bike, it's not a big issue. And like I said, these are just nitpicky things because I really loved owning this bike. So the last thing that I'll have to say here, as we're on one of the last rides here on the Dyna.
A few moments later.
Alright guys, there's one more thing that I did not mention, so this is gonna look like a bad cut in this video, this final review, and it is just a bad cut because I forgot to mention is the heat on this bike, okay? And so what I wanted to mention about the heat on this bike is that, you know, I've never really had an issue as far as that goes. On long rides, you definitely don't feel it, and I think that's pretty normal. The only time that I've ever felt the real heat come off this bike, we were in bumper-to-bumper traffic for like an hour when I brought this bike home, after I bought it. So for like an hour, we're in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and it actually was kind of cool. It wasn't like a hot afternoon. It was like a cool evening, and yeah, I could start to feel the heat come off of the bike, particularly in the area right down here, where the exhaust passes by your leg. You know, because it's right there next to your leg when you have your feet up here on the pegs. So I will say that if you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic, this bike isn't any fun, and that's another reason why it's nice to live in California, because you can lane split. But this is another thing, because this bike is fairly wide, it's a little bit difficult to lane split. You know, I do it on occasion, especially in traffic when I don't want to just sit there. But that's another thing that you want to consider too. If you're used to a sport bike where it's nice and narrow, your hands are in close, that this bike is fairly wide. And if you're a guy who likes to lane split here in California, or in a state, I think there's maybe one other state in the United States where lane splitting or filtering is legal, that's just something you'll want to take into consideration, besides the heat, if you're in traffic a lot. So again, it might seem like a nitpicky thing, but it is something that you'll want to consider if the Dyna Fat Bob is on your short list of bikes that you're considering.
We now return to your regular programming.
But the last thing I'll say here is, I've had a lot of comments on my review videos of different Harley-Davidson, or my review videos of this bike, where people will say things like, you know, Harley-Davidsons are crap bikes, they're over expensive, then they underperform, they're heavy, why would you waste your money on a bike like that when you could get a lot more bike for a lot less money that's not so heavy, that you can go faster on, blah blah blah, you know? And then you hear the argument from Harley owners, hey, you know, we can get close to the same performance, you're never going to get us down to the weight as far as sportier bikes go, but Harley owners will be like, well, you can put a stage 3 kit in, you can do this. This is another thing that I don't agree with. You know, if pretty sure that's not what that middle divider was meant for here. Not sure why you had to drive up on the brake. Anyway, it's my ADD. I don't agree with Harley owners either saying, you know, oh, you know, if you want more performance, you can put this kit in, and you can add this and add that. Well, you can definitely do those things to get more performance out of your Harley, but you're talking about a select group of people who have the money to do those kinds of things to a Harley, because really, Harleys are expensive to own, period. And that's before you talk about putting any money into mods on a bike like this. So that's what I would say to those people who say, well, you know, they're crap bikes, they're too expensive, and blah blah blah. What I would say to those people, I would say is, you know what, these are people who buy Harleys and ride Harleys. We don't want to ride sport bikes. You know, we like the performance of a Harley-Davidson, and it's just fine for us. And you don't have to tell me that you can get more horsepower out of you know, a 600cc sport bike or whatever. Having a Harley-Davidson is more than just the motorcycle's performance, and I'm not ashamed, or I'm not going to shy away from saying that that's not what Harley is all about. Harley isn't just about the motorcycle's performance. It's about a lifestyle, and it's about a style preference. And I think that's pretty well known to everybody, but I just wanted to put that out there, you know, because if you're watching this video and you're like, oh, you're finally gonna get a sport bike, you're finally gonna get a real bike. No, this isn't what this is all about. I'm not hating on Harley. I'm not fanboying on Harley. I'm not turning over to another, and I'm not betraying Harley, because I'm not gonna say that I'll never own another Harley-Davidson. That's definitely not out of the question for the future. So I'm not gonna burn any bridges, because there aren't any bridges to burn. I love my motorcycle. It's just time for me to have a new experience, and that's what all this is about. I'm ready to get out there and see and test my skills on a different style, and I'm ready for it. I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to introduce all of you to the new bike. So in the comments, I want you to leave whether or not you want to see a live reveal of the bike. Now, preference wise for me, I'd rather not do a live reveal, because I'm terrible at letting the cat out of the bag early, and I don't know if I'll accidentally say what bike I'm gonna have or what bike you're gonna be looking at. But I will do it if that is what the viewers want. It'll have to be a vast majority of people though, because my preference is to do a reveal on a video that I'm able to manipulate and you know, and make it just the way I want it. Because, you know, when you do things live, being a guy who's done live theater for the last 23 years, you know, I know when things can go wrong, and I know what can go wrong, and it's just something I'd rather not do. So, but if that's what you want, I'm here to please. So leave it in the comments if you want a live reveal of the next bike. So guys, that's all I've got for you today on this final review of the 2013 Harley-Davidson Dyna Fat Bob. If you like this video, make sure you indicate so by hitting the like button, and also if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Alright guys, I'm that one guy letting you know, if you're riding, be safe, and if you're not riding, get riding. This is that one guy, and I am out.